Okay, so good morning, everyone. Lots of familiar faces. Good to see you this morning. And welcome to our last board meeting of 2021. So Chuck, could you, as vice chair, call this meeting to order, and maybe we could get after that a motion to approve the meetings from our September meeting?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our welcome to our September 2021 OHRC meeting.
For the record, that's December, but
yeah, it says December, but it should say September, right? But welcome aboard. I'm going to turn you over now to Dr. Mark Johnson.
all right, thanks, Chuck. Okay, so the meeting is now called to order. Could we get a motion from the floor to approve the September minutes? Everyone on the board should have received a copy of those minutes from September earlier this month.
Mark, I'll make the motion that we approve September's meeting minutes.
Okay, thanks, Lance. Is there a second?
Good.
Lindsay Ball seconds that.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay, and thank you, Chuck, for opening things up. With your permission, I'd like to make a few opening remarks before we get too far into today's agenda. We've got an awful lot to cover today, so I'll try to be brief. First and foremost, I need to call attention to the fact that Brad Halverson, who served as this board's chair since February of 2018, chose to resign last month. Now, for me, Brad's resignation was completely unexpected, and I'd like to just take a moment to recognize the service to OHRC that Brad has provided, and all of his support for the work that I and others have done out at the center over the years. So Brad's service is much appreciated. I think he was very effective in his position as chair. And again, it was quite a surprise to me when he chose to resign. He brought a strong voice to this board. Now, it might not always have been obvious, but I actually really enjoyed working with Brad, as I do other members of this board. But in that he has chosen to resign, this board will need to elect a new chair this morning. I hope that those of you that are interested in that position will express your interest if you haven't already. And as we work through our agenda this morning, I'll do my best to keep us on schedule as director and address all the items on our agenda. It's a packed agenda. Again, we're still stuck in this virtual format. I hope that in the coming year, we'll be able to break out of this pretty early. I expect we will be able to and pull everyone together in person for
That'd be nice.
First meeting, if not our first meeting, the second meeting of the year. So soon we can hopefully get back to something that is a little closer to normal for this board to get together and meet. Now, before I turn things over to Jen for a facilities update, I'd like to just say a few words about my service as director at the OHRC. So as some of you know, earlier this year, I applied for the full-time director position. And, I did this with the most sincere intentions, but after thinking this over, having a number of conversations with my family, I chose to withdraw my application about a month ago. And I want it to be perfectly clear that my decision to withdraw that application wasn't driven by my feelings about working with members of this board. As I said before, I enjoy working with you. And I even appreciate the challenges that sometimes we face to find common ground. But generally, I'm really satisfied with our ability to work towards agreeable solutions. So Just want that to be clear. And while I don't plan to serve as OHRC director much longer, you know, I'm confident in the leadership of the OHRC. As OSU and ODFW, they're currently interviewing 2 exceptional candidates. So my plan is to work with the new director as they transition into that position, and I plan to remain, you know, fully engaged at the OHRC with its research, its mission and operations. So I just wanted to be clear about that. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, I think we can hand things over to Jen for a facilities update.
Right, good morning. I will keep it relatively brief.
Morning, Jen.
Good morning. So as far as staff goes, our host, Alan Richards, has returned this year. He'll be here through April. We're really happy to have him back. The technician, Brian Willett, accepted a new job, and he'll be leaving the end of this month to go to Marion Forks Fish Hatchery. And so we're going to be doing interviews for his position next week. We have a pretty good candidate pool. Got about 12 people to interview. On the education and outreach front, Craig's been working on developing a longer, more education-based tour for us to provide the classes that would normally come to the facility but can't due to our COVID restrictions. And he's going to be working on a spawning observation video. We may have missed the boat on some of this since we're supposed to be reopening here in about 2 weeks, but it's not going to hurt to have these in our back pocket if we need them. And then since we didn't reopen in September, Craig went to Lucky and Mute Charter School. They had a field trip planned in November. Obviously, they couldn't come anymore, so he went up there and did dissection classes with them. We also had a preschool class that was going to come out here. So I provided some information on our fish returns for them. They ended up coming out and visiting on their own since the outdoor facility is open. And there have been a couple other classes and groups that have come and done that on their own. For facility maintenance type things, we've received the Army Corps permit in its final form to do the dam apron extension next summer. The R&E board voted to approve the funding for the project, so the commissioners need to approve the board's recommendations, and then we'll be good to go. That should be happening in January, and then I've talked to engineering about the timeline for getting the contract written and getting a contractor lined up to do the job as early in the summer as we can. We've seen a lot of engineering recently. The pole barn has a leaking roof, so they've been out to do plans on that. They've been working on plans for a couple of expansions on the houses. And in the process of doing some pest control at the facility, the guys found that the foundation had rotted away under one of the houses. So now we're working on figuring out how to get an emergency repair on that. It's just a small portion of the house, but it drops about 1.25 inches over 4 feet with that damage. And they've also been out here working with us on a landslide siren and troubleshooting our alarms. The intake continues to be an issue. We have reached out to Ryan at engineering to get a little further on that line as far as needing a redesign, because what we have doesn't work anymore at all. For our operational research, I really was hoping to have something to show you, at least some trends of what we're looking at now, but did not get there. So we keep moving along with our projects. Craig is working on a survey of the angler caught broodstock programs at ODFW hatcheries with Mark. He's spent time with Eric to start looking at the opercular deformities that we see here and see if we see them at Alsea hatchery as well. Our percentage of deformity has been incredibly high this year. And so we want to we want to work with LC to see if the percentage of fish being released with deformities and the percentage of fish adults that return with a deformity is similar. And if it's not, then that could be worth looking at in the future to see if that deformity could have some influence on survival. And then I've reached out to the Surrogate Project for help with our statistical analysis of the various projects we've been doing. We can run the project, we can raise the fish, we can collect the data, but statistics is definitely not my forte. And that is something that they do on a regular basis. So I've gotten 2020's data to them, and then I've started to compile what we have for this year to see if there are any trends. On the landslide front, we've gotten about 32 inches of rain since the summer, which is more than we had last year. Last year, at least through November, we were about 4 inches less than we have now. There isn't any turbidity yet, which is pretty surprising. And I don't know if that means that all the loose stuff got washed out last year and it's just kind of bare rock up there. I don't know if that means we've kind of reset to the beginning and it's going to take time to wash stuff out again, or if all of that water is just, soaking into the ground and running underneath and creating a really beautiful slide plane. So we stay vigilant and pay attention to that. And then as far as our adult trap goes, as of yesterday, we've worked 1,070 fish. We had 407 total Chinook. Another really great Chinook year. That'd be second behind last year. 246 males, 141 females, and 20 jacks. And we had some really big fish again. The biggest one this year was just a little smaller than last year. We had 104 centimeters this year. And many fish that were above 100 centimeters. And the coho are also coming back really well. We have fewer jacks than last year and really big fish again. The biggest coho this year so far is 88 centimeters. And I think that might be the biggest coho I've ever seen. So we've handled 618 coho, 288 males, 270 females, and 60 jacks. And then the rest of the fish have been cutthroat trout. If you may remember, we post these numbers online, and the links can be found at the OHRC webpage or by Googling the OHRC fish counts. And I try to get that updated once a week. I think I've been updating on Fridays, sort of, and we only put numbers up if there were fish. So there was a week there where we only worked the trap one day, and so we don't update it if there's nothing to update. And that is what is going on out here.
All right. Thanks so much, Jen.
You bet.
So many fish coming back.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
So I'll give a brief update on budget, and I'm going to attempt to share my screen. During our September meeting, I presented a graphic of revenue coming into the fund, and I added a data point to that because we've passed another quarter. So let me see if I can share the screen. Okay, so hopefully you can all see this slide. I don't know that I need to make it a presentation. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
So here we are in our latest quarter of July to September. Of course, we don't have all the data for the quarter that we're in right now. Carl Schreck, when we presented this, or when I presented this data in September, and noted that our April to June quarter was higher than it had been in the previous year. He suggested that this might be cyclic, and it is. So we now see a drop, just as we saw during the same quarter last year, falling really to about the same level. So our revenue appears to be quite stable and steady, though cyclical throughout the season. Spending has declined this year. So our researchers have reined in their spending on budgets. This is for a variety of reasons. But one of those being that we have curtailed some of our commitment, and they've, concomitantly tightened their belts. So that brings us now to the situation we're in. We have an estimated revenue forecast for this biennium of about $1 million, give or take. We've already committed $635,000 to 3 ongoing strategic research projects led by Michael Banks, Michael Bluen, and Carl Schreck, taking over for David Noakes, which leaves about $400,000 available to allocate to either new research or extend the funding for ongoing research, which is something we need to discuss either today or in the future. It is an agenda item for us later this morning. So that's where we're at in terms of budget. Are there any questions?
The money committed, the $675,000, to when does that expire, need to be renewed? What date?
Right, so that's $635,000 was awarded to collectively to the 3 projects. That contract does not expire until June 30th of 2023. Note, very important here to recognize that that is not enough to keep these 3 projects going through the full term of the biennium. So for instance, if the board would like to see Dr. Michael Bluen's work continue, we will need to provide more funding for that project. We've committed, at the beginning of this new RFP process and the new cycle and the way in which we structured these budgets, we committed to keep Dr. Bluen, his project going through the course of the process. So we have now conducted a research, brought new research concepts to this board. We prioritized those research concepts, which I included in a request for proposals. Received 5 proposals that address those priority research concepts. And those proposals received technical reviews, which you've now seen. We need to make decisions on those proposals. If we can't make decisions on those proposals now, then it's my firm belief that we need to extend support for Dr. Bluen and his ongoing work, which has always received support here at the center, at least through the term of the process, that being the board's decision to prioritize one or more of those research proposals. Any questions on that?
Hey, Mark, can you pick me up here?
Yeah, sure, I can hear you, Travis. Good morning.
This is Derek.
Oh, hi, Derek. Sorry.
Hey, real basic question, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. All this, the cyclical funding that you were just looking at there, that solely comes through through fishing license fees. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's some language in the legislation, and I can forward the link to. There's ad valorem taxes, fishing licenses. There's a variety of sources that come through ODFW user fees that support the research. Yes.
All right. Thanks.
Any other questions here? And we can talk about the proposals and a bit more later in the morning too. We have that on the agenda. Okay, we're running a little ahead of schedule then. Dr. Happel, would you like to say a few words about the director search?
Yeah, hi, everybody. Great, thanks. Thanks for giving me the floor for just a couple minutes here. Wanted to update you on the search for David Noakes' replacement. Not that anyone could actually ever replace David. And we've sent out information about 2 top candidates that were actually in the interview process for Dr. Bill Ardren and Dr. Sean Narum. So Bill was here last week and Sean will be here this week. We had to go with an all remote meeting, which really and it was kind of a last minute thing. So it kind of really affected our scheduling and so on. But what it means is that the seminars are all recorded, and we can send along the links to those so that you can have a look at them. I just put in the chat the links and the information on the 2 seminars, which the links that are there are actually for your feedback. So if you would like to watch those seminars, or if you've looked at the CV and information about Dr. Ardren, you can send comments in through those links. And then I can also send you, I think we've already forwarded the links to the seminars as well and other information, but we can do that again. At the top of that, what I just put into the chat, I've got my contact information. So if you'd prefer to just contact me directly with questions or with comments about the candidates, I'd be happy to chat with you about that. So Dr. Narum will be giving his seminars tomorrow and Thursday. And then I would expect that the search committee will provide a recommendation. We have 2 other possible candidates that are more junior faculty that are kind of in the wings if one of the 2 that we're interviewing right now don't work out. So I'll give you new updates as we get them. Hard to say what the start date for this would be for the position, because it really depends on what the preferred candidate can negotiate and when they would likely to be able to come to Oregon. But of course, we're pushing as hard as we can to get somebody in place quickly. So does anybody have any questions about that?
Yeah, I have a question. I was looking at the regulations, and according to that 498.833, says the State Fish and Wildlife Director, after consultation with the chairperson of the department related to fish and wildlife at Oregon State University, you, I suppose, and the Oregon Hatchery Research Center Board established shall appoint the director. So it sounds like Kurt Melcher makes the appointment after consultation with you and with the board.
It's actually, yeah. So the position is, oh, I'm sorry, Scott, I'm interrupting you. Go ahead.
So it appears that the board has like a third vote or something in this. So I wonder if the board is going to have the opportunity. Apparently it's boiled down to 2 candidates and perhaps somebody else if they fall through. But at some point, does the board, I hope the board will engage in reading the resumes and getting involved in who the director is, but then it seems like it would be a logical thing for the board to have a vote on which candidate we recommend as a vote and give you that information to carry on with that.
Absolutely. So I think that would be great. I'll just be honest that Brad's departure also threw things into a bit of a disarray for me, at least, because I didn't have a contact person to know who to be. It wasn't clear to me what I should be doing with all of you. So let me back up one sec. So yes, I should have mentioned when I talked about how the hiring would actually happen, that I would be in consultation with Kurt. The position is an Oregon State University professor. So that's where so it's We will work together on it, but the position itself is actually appointed by Oregon State.
No, it says right here, though, this, if you look up the ORS 498.833, it says the State Fish and Wildlife Director, after consultation with the chairperson of a department related to fish and wildlife at Oregon State University and the Oregon Hatchery Research Center Board established under, shall appoint a director of the Oregon Hatchery Research Center. So it clearly says in the law that Kurt Melcher probably makes the appointment after approval by you and the board.
Well, thanks very much for bringing that to my attention. And I was under a different impression, my bad for not reviewing the legislation. I will talk to Kurt about how he wants to proceed because the position is split. So half is paid by Oregon State University and half is paid by Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. So I will get on the phone to Kurt and see how he wants to proceed. And then after you all elect a chair today, I can have a conversation with that person about what they think we should be doing as far as getting feedback from all of you and input to Kurt for the appointment.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I know it's kind of difficult. I try to follow these regulations and one leads you to another, but we want to be sure we're following the law so nothing goes haywire along the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do understand. And I apologize for not being, I'm also in the Dan Edge originally hired David Noakes or worked with ODF and W2 hired David Noakes. So I'm playing catch up a little bit myself. So thank you very much for the information.
Yep. You're welcome.
Any other questions about it? Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Selena. So our next item on our agenda is board chair election. So Chuck, would you be willing to sort of lead the proceedings here as vice chair?
Why don't we just nominate? I'd like to nominate Starkey for the chair.
Okay, we have a nomination from Ted Simon for Scott Starkey. And when we're ready to move forward and have a vote, I think I can work through a list of all your names and just if you could voice your choice for chair, I'll record those to record the votes instead of using an electronic format or some sort of survey. So then we'll also have an audio record of votes. Scott, you've been nominated. Do you accept or decline the nomination?
Yeah, I'll accept.
Do we have other nominations?
Did you all see the recommendation from board member Carl Schreck to have a co-chair?
Do we have a nomination for the chairmanship? Do we have other nominations?
You know, I think when you're talking of a co-chair, I think perhaps we should wait and see who is going to be the chair. And the chair could be involved in the selection of the co-chair.
Yeah, I agree.
Does that make sense, Mark?
Yeah, that's fine by me. I am not going to suggest that I am any professor of parliamentary procedure here or Robert's Rules of Order, Chuck, but that sounds fine. For the record, Brad's tenure as board chair was set to extend into the first meeting of 2022. So his departure was a little bit early, but and unexpected. But this process that's unfolding here today to elect a new chair was set to happen at the next meeting, if not today. So the vice chair, similarly, that position would remain valid to the first meeting of 2022. So I don't see a problem with waiting until the next meeting if others see that fit as well, to elect a new vice chair. And until that time, Chuck, you are the sitting vice chair.
Chuck, this is Tom
Is this
Alford.
election,
Chuck,
is this election for an interim chair, or are we electing for the next term plus this time?
This today is the election for a new OHRC board chair. According to the board's charter, the chair sits for 2 consecutive 2-year terms.
Thank you.
Mark,
Or up to 2 consecutive 2-year terms. Yes,
Mark, this is Tom Alford. Is my voice still there?
sure is, Tom.
Could I nominate somebody else too?
Of course.
I'd like to nominate Travis Mackey to be the chairman.
Travis, do you accept or decline the nomination?
Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to decline the nomination. I'm not really sure I have the capacity within my position here at the Tribe-In to chair the board.
Thank you both. All right, I say we give this another minute. Do we have other nominations for the position of chair of the OHRC board?
I have a question. Do the nominees have to be voting members?
That's a good question. I don't believe so.
Well, I'll nominate Lance Kruzek.
Can't be.
Well, Steve, I appreciate your confidence, but I have to decline as well.
Oh, come on, Lance.
Sorry about that, team.
Thank you both. Okay, the time is 9:35. Are there other questions, comments, or nominations from the floor? Okay, we have one candidate. Feels like a Soviet election, but I will walk down the list. We have one nominee, Scott Starkey. Lindsay Ball, how would you like to cast your vote? And I'm walking down a list of names as they appear on our website of board members. And Lindsay, you're at the top of that list. Scott Starkey, I believe you get to vote
So if I get to vote for myself, I guess I will.
Okay, very good. Tom, Elkhire,
No.
okay. Jack Smith, is Jack here today? Believe so.
Yeah, I vote yes.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Ed Simon,
Yes.
Steve Jacobs,
No.
Travis Mackey,
No.
Dwight Collins here with us this morning.
Yes, I am on the phone, audio only.
Would you care to cast a vote, Dwight?
No.
Thank you. Derek Wall,
I'm a little uncomfortable voting. I guess I just got a little description in front of me of each person here, and that's, I guess, my best understanding of everybody here. I don't know if there's an undecided vote. Is that an option or no?
I believe you can abstain.
Okay. I think I'm gonna have to go with that. At the moment, I just don't know that would be constructive for me to vote or not.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Chuck,
Not interested in the chair position.
okay, would you care to cast a vote in favor of Scott Starkey as new board chair?
Yes, I would.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have 4 votes in favor of Scott, of 10 members. 6 abstain. Is there a parliamentarian who would like to offer their advice in this case?
He's got it.
We're missing Carl today.
I don't know if this is right, but it seems like the motion to appoint the nominee would not pass. And so that's essentially no action.
Sean, does that sound right to you? We have 4 votes in favor of 10 members, 4 vote in favor of appointing Scott Starkey board chair.
So I heard 4 for and 4 against and 1 abstaining. Is that right?
I believe that's right.
Then, yeah, I believe Lance is correct. The motion doesn't carry and the board has to make another motion.
Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, I was just curious. Is this something that we could bring delay until the next meeting, or is it pretty important to put somebody in right now?
In my view, it's critical that you put elect a board chair, and there is a legislative mandate to do that. Yes.
Okay.
It's Tom Elkhire. Why can't the current vice chair be there for another few months until March?
I'll just kind of give my thoughts. I think if the board wants time to consider this and talk to each other, I think it's within your rights to do that and have the vote at the next meeting and continue with Chuck and the vice chair running this meeting.
And I'll say that's acceptable by me as well, Sean, for what that's worth.
I have a question, Mark. When is Chuck, when did he become vice chair? I remember when Brad was chair, didn't we have a chair and a co-chair at that time? And they both left, but I don't recall. I know Chuck was chair earlier, but I can't remember when that started.
Yeah, I believe Chuck was reappointed as vice chair in February of 2018, Scott.
Was that the same time that Brad and what was his name, Kyle before, was co-chairs?
Yeah, to my understanding, and I could go back and review those minutes, but that's my recollection.
Yeah, I should look back. I'm not like, I remember Chuck was vice chair and I think it came in at that time.
Yes.
Prior to that, Cam was chair and Lindsay and I were co-chairs at that time. Yeah. Co-vice chairs.
Yeah. Chuck, do you recall the date that you began your tenure as vice chair?
I don't recall the date, but it was back then in Cam's reign. That's where I remember it, Scott. How about you?
I know when Cam was chair, Lindsay and I think were vice chairs. You remember Lindsay?
That's correct.
Yeah. And then I think when when Cam retired or left, then Brad agreed to be chair if he had a co-chair, which was then I can't remember, Kyle, I think can't remember his name, but then he quit. And then when Brad left, there would be two co-chairs, but I don't recall, since they had two co-chairs, I don't recall having a vice chair, but if it was at that time, it probably would have been then when Chuck was elected vice chair or took the position. I kind of remember that at that point.
I'm reading here from at the November meeting, Chuck Pavlik expressed, this is in 2017, Chuck expressed interest in continuing in the vice chair position on the board. The board approved the appointment of Chuck to vice chair by acclamation.
That does it. Yeah, that makes sense. That's right when Brad became chair at the same time.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Right. Good.
We keep good notes.
Good.
So would someone on the board like to propose an action?
So I think your options here are to nominate a chair or move to table the discussion until next meeting. And you need a majority to table that, I think, too.
Okay. And you know, I'm getting a note here, and I agree with the point that's being raised. I did not, Lindsay, I didn't get a response from you. Did you choose to abstain from a vote, or did you care to cast a vote?
Which would you want me to do? I mean, what's on the table?
So there was right. So I believe, and that's right. So there would need to be a motion to appoint Scott, right?
That's correct.
And I suppose we did not hear that motion, did we?
I have not, I don't
It was
recall.
a nomination. We had a nomination, but we did not have a motion to appoint. So
Are you calling a motion to appoint?
I cannot. I'm not a board member.
Mark, did you get a vote from Lindsay? I didn't even catch
No.
that.
No, I didn't, and I suspect that Lindsay was abiding by procedure, and since there was no motion, there could be no vote.
That's correct.
Right.
So we have a nomination for you as board chair, Scott, but there has not been a motion on the floor for a vote. We kind of walked through it, but we could not consider that official. Is that correct, Lindsay?
So what we're doing, we're here just at a standstill without a vote or without a motion to cast a vote. Is that correct?
Right, so we have a nominee, and that's where we are.
Or are we ready to
So you're
cast a
waiting
vote?
for, or you're waiting for somebody to make a motion?
To cast a vote?
This is Jack. I would make a motion that we cast a vote.
I
Thank you,
second
Jack.
that motion.
Okay,
We need to move this on. I have my second there.
okay, thank you, Lindsay. So we can walk through this again. I'll record votes, yay, nay, or abstain, for the appointment of Scott Starkey as board chair. Lindsay Ball, how do you cast your vote?
Yes, for Scott.
Okay, thank you. Scott?
Mark, I believe Lance has wanted to chime in here, right, Lance?
Yes, Lance?
Yeah, sorry, just a clarification. So there needs to be a real clear motion on what that is. So the motion would be to nominate Scott Starkey as chair of the board and then have a second. If somebody seconds that, then discussion and then vote.
Thank you. That's correct, Lance. My apologies. So we have a motion, a second, and now it's open for discussion.
Well, discussion on my end would be, I think we should table this until March because we have only 10 people there now. 2 people are not on the board. And so I think the fact that we would have a vote a chairman for 4 people out of 12 board, I don't think that would be appropriate.
That makes sense to me.
I believe if you got a quorum, you can have a vote.
Mark, is it necessary to take another count of people and see exactly where we're at? Is it 4 or 5? And can Scott vote for himself? How does that work?
So I believe Scott can vote for himself. We do have a quorum, but we are missing 2 representatives on our board, which isn't entirely unusual.
To further discussion, I would like to follow up on this tabling it until the next meeting when we can be in person, and it wasn't so disjointed trying to come up with a vote here.
Well, if I can speak here, I think if I'm following it correctly, the nomination's been made and seconded, and now you're ready for a vote. Isn't that right, Mark?
I'm googling Robert's Rules of Orders to make sure I'm getting this right, Scott. We have, the floor is open for discussion. I believe that the motion could be tabled. Does that sound correct? Or there could be
I think we have enough uncertainty here to where it would be wise to give this more thought and make sure we're proceeding in the right direction. I think right now we're kind of guessing on what the procedure is.
I'm pretty sure you can't table the motion unless you vote on that.
That's correct. To table the motion requires a vote.
I think you just call for a vote is what you should do. If call for a vote, I've been nominated, call for a vote and see if if it passes that I become chair or not, one or the other, but we need to do it.
Can we make a motion to table?
Can you make a motion to table before you follow through with the other motion?
I'm not sure. I'm asking.
I don't think so.
To ask.
We're just going on what we think.
I could be wrong, but I believe after discussion, if there's uncertainty on the motion, you can make a revised motion and vote on that new motion to table the nomination of the chair until the next meeting.
Ted, you made the nomination. Do you want to do it again? Make it clear? I think we need to move on and vote. Ted, are you there? Did we lose Ted?
Oh, yeah, are you there? Yes, I want to go ahead with the vote.
Okay, so to be clear, to my understanding, during discussion, following the initial motion and second to call a vote, we're now in discussion. During this discussion, a board member can make a motion to table the vote. And that has to then be seconded and a vote. But we need that motion from the floor and it needs to be seconded and carry a majority vote. Otherwise, we move forward with the vote. That's
I move we table it.
of how this proceeds.
Yeah, I would move that we table it until March.
That's a motion.
Yeah, that's my motion.
Is there a second for that motion?
Lindsey Ball seconds that motion.
Okay. So the vote then, well, so do we have a discussion on this? I suppose there could be. Or we move forward with a vote to table this. And if that vote does not, if that is not supported by vote, then we move back to the vote for Scott as board chair. Is everyone in agreement with that procedure? Anyone opposed? Okay, thanks. So we have a motion and a second to table the vote. What you're now voting on is whether or not to table the vote to your next meeting. Lindsey Ball, yes or no, or abstain? To table the vote.
Table the vote at this time.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Scott Starkey, to table the vote, yes or no?
No.
Okay, thank you. Tom Alkire?
Yes.
Yes. Jack Smith?
No.
No, thank you. Ted Simon?
Move forward.
So that is a no.
No.
Okay, thank you. Steve Jacobs?
Yes.
Yes. Travis Mackey?
Yes.
Dwight Collins?
Yes.
Derek Wall?
I'd vote yes to table the discussion, the vote.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And Chuck Pavlik?
No.
No. Okay, so I count, and on the motion to table the vote, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes. 10. So I believe the motion to table the vote passes. And the motion is tabled to the motion to hold an election for nominee Scott Starkey has been tabled. Okay. Questions or comments, or we move on our agenda?
Yeah, is there a way to do a vote prior to the next meeting? If it's critical to get somebody in, or do we need to be in this format?
We need to be in a meeting, to my understanding, Derek. Good question, though. Thank you.
Well, in the meantime, it's up to Chuck to run the meetings and the agenda and everything. He's the acting chair now.
That's correct. Thank you, Scott.
Where are we at? Mark, I've lost my place on the agenda.
Sure. I believe we're now at the 10 o'clock hour, and we're back on schedule. So we're going to open the floor for public comment, which we haven't done during these online platform meetings. But today we're going to take a moment for public comment. I ask the public to please keep your comments short. We have a 10-minute period total, so let's try and keep them short so that everybody that wants to speak has an opportunity to speak. So are there members from the public that would like to speak? And you can simply unmute yourself.
I have a question, Mark. It seems like it'd be more appropriate for a public comment after the research proposals and things are discussed. Perhaps that's what they wanted to comment about.
We could do that. I in fact, worked with others to structure the agenda as we distributed it, Scott, based on advice that public comment come before. But if no one from the public would like to comment now, well, we can certainly move on to the next item on our agenda and take public comment later if there's time. So so in not hearing any public comment, we're going to move on to the next item in our agenda. That is the OHRC strategic direction and research. We were expecting to have a board, or I was expecting to have a board chair at this moment, who would be able to offer some comments on their thoughts about the strategic direction of the OHRC. But we've tabled that. And this agenda item is here initially through proposal by our former chair, Brad Halverson, who wanted to have a discussion during this board meeting about how the OHRC moves forward, what kinds of research are prioritized. Does the OHRC focus on longer term strategic research projects, shorter operational research projects? Do we continue to use those sorts of terms to describe our research? And so this is the time for you as a board to discuss all of that. Are there any thoughts that members of the board would like to express at this time on that topic?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on it. when the board was first formed, for those members of the board who might not understand the history of it, but when there's a couple of us who are members of the first board right after it was started. I mean, we're right in the beginning. But anyway, we were told that OHRC, the facility is funded by about $1.2 million a year, which covers the facilities and staff, Jen, and the people there to keep utilities, keep the operation running. But there was no money for research. And the research was being done in at least the first 2 years that I was on the board. The research being done was through grants from outside sources, and that funded what research was done. And it was interesting research going on, except OHRC could not direct the research the way we wanted because we didn't have the funding. We weren't funding them, but we as a board could prioritize the research and which we had the facilities and the staff available to handle it. But then it was proposed to us, the board, the 3 key research projects we have now, the homing and domestication and mate choice. And it was proposed to us, the board, that these were good, they were longer term projects, certainly, because they had to go through 3 salmon cycles or so. And they would help solve some of the questions between wild and hatchery. But we pretty much anticipated that along the way, coming out of these projects, even though they were long-term, that we would see some results come out that could be applied to hatcheries to make them more effective. But they needed funding. There was no funding for these projects. So some of us, Chuck and Lindsay and Cam and myself, we went to the House Ag Natural Resources Committee and tried to get funding for these projects, and ended up with passing in 2015. We got passed the House Bill 3012, which is the funding for these 3 key projects. And that was I believe a $1 tax on licenses and 3 to 4% ad valorem tax for commercial fishermen, 3 or 4 cents a pound. And the legislatures, we went to House Ag Natural Resources Committee, and the sponsors, which were Krieger and Roblin and Brad Witt and people like that, to help get the money, fund these things. We went to fishermen, decided to go to fishermen to get the money. And that's where it came from. And fishermen pretty well agreed. And that's how we got that thing passed. But the fishermen expected the money coming out of that to result in research and improvements, enhancing the hatcheries to improve production and operation and increased harvestable returns. I mean, you're after commercial fishermen and sports fishermen for the money. They agreed to it, but their interest is harvestable fish returns. And so now, and we got that funding and we got these 3 projects started. If you recall, we put together these flow charts to check on the progress of the projects to see if they were on target, on budget, or if they were producing the results we expected. If they weren't producing the results we expected, the board could at any time divert the projects, change them to something we thought that would be more productive or meeting the goal of the fishermen that were funding them. Or if they were off target, we could change it. In budget, we could monitor that. So it was up to us, up the board, to do that. Well, now, I mean, I was very enthused about these 3 projects, and I still think they might produce something out of them. But Now, 6 years later, we really expected that we would have more fish out there, to harvestable fish, or we would have gotten something out of these 3 projects that would apply to hatcheries to improve them. But as I look at where these 3 projects are now, Mate Choice, for one, a very interesting project to see find the difference between wild fish and hatchery fish, or how they choose their mates, and if we could apply that to the hatchery. But as I understand that project right now, Michael Banks' project, that when these fish coming back now to return, he's going to have to grab a male and grab a female and get the genetic sample from them, and it's going to take a week or something like that holding them before you can figure out which choices you want to mate. If that's correct, there's no, it's not applicable to the hatchery, because at least in a step program I'm familiar with, we're dealing with fish right immediately. We got to spawn them just quick as they come in. So that's a concern I have about that mate choice study. The domestication study that Michael Bluen's doing is interesting. I mean, we're learning about nose pokes and families, and whether they feed up or whether they feed low, or what they, what their personalities are. But so far, haven't seen anything that actually is applicable back into the hatcheries right now. The homing project that David had, and I think Carl's taken over now, looks like it's going to have some really interesting results, and it's going to be applicable. Well, we'll find a chemical to put in the water that'll bring fish back into the hatchery, and to solve that PHOS issue. But as you look at the PHOS issue, it looks like, as I see it, there's only about two locations of the hatcheries in the state of Oregon that is really an issue. So how much is going to be applied? So I, as a representative, a board representative of a group, they're asking, are we getting our money's worth out of these projects, or what are they going to lead to? And so I think we need to answer those questions. I mean, the fishermen expect results that are going to improve hatchery operations, production, and increase restored harvestable fish returns. I think we need to ask the scientists and ask ourselves a question about the research, that how could this research be aligned to accomplish what the people footing the bill are looking for? And I don't think I think we need to take our 3 key projects, sit down and go through them, find out exactly how much money has been spent on each project, how much is anticipated to be spent on the projects, what research, what outcome is expected out of each project that will improve hatcheries and enhance harvestable fish returns. Now, OHRC can do any kind of long-term interesting research that we want. After all, it is the Oregon Hatchery Research Center. It's a hatchery research center. It's not the Fish Science Center. But we can do long-term strategic fish science, but we need to find somebody to fund it. This money coming out of House Bill 3012 is fishermen money who are interested in harvestable fish returns. So these projects that we have, the money out of these projects should be spent on something that clearly is going to enhance hatcheries, production, operation, and harvestable fish returns. And if they're not directed to that, these people are going to pull I think they, could pull their money and don't want to continue the funding it. So we got to look very carefully at what we're doing with the funds from House Bill 3012. So everybody needs to understand where that's coming from, where the money's coming from to support these projects. And for the proposals you have now, besides our 3 key projects, Mark, that's pulling $400,000 or so out of Bluen's project, which is, again, fishermen's money who are interested in harvestable fish returns. So we need to keep that focus. Again, OHRC can do long-term interesting fish science if you find funding to do it. But the House Bill 3012 money better be spent for fishermen and improving our hatcheries. Hatchery Research Center. So that's my point.
All right, thank you, Scott. Other thoughts from members of the board?
Well, if nobody else is going to comment, I'll comment again. We decided to table having electing a chair. We really can't. We should have a chair and a vice chair to function properly, but if we don't have it, I would suggest we suspend any further funding of any projects until we have a chance to have the three scientists until I would say next meeting, the March meeting. Mark, if you could go through each of the three projects and explain to us exactly how much money in detail, how much money has been spent on each of the three key projects, how much money is anticipated to be spent on them. And then we ask each of the three scientists to again go through their project and explain to us how the money being spent is going to benefit the fishermen who are funding the projects, how this is going to improve hatcheries. And a lot of the guys who agreed to support this are older people, and they expect to see something done in their lifetime, folks like me. So we need to go through each of the three projects, have each scientist go through his project, explain how the outcome of that project is going to be applied to hatcheries to improve fish runs and enhance the hatchery operation. And if the project as designed now is not getting there, how could they alter it to get some shorter term outcomes that would satisfy the fishermen? And then we should have the scientists out of the room, and the board should have open discussion debating each project. Then, depending on how the board agrees on that, then we should talk about your other proposals, Mark, if there's money available for those, and prioritize how that could be spent. Now, short of having those discussions, I would be in favor of tabling the rest of this meeting till March. And we're ready to do that because I don't think, we don't have a fully functioning board right now anyway.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you, Scott, is that you'd like to hear what the overall budgets of these projects are, which I believe those were provided in the strategic research plan, the overall budgets, and we can certainly deliver funds spent to date to you, that we have those numbers. So I can get that information to the board. The projected total costs were presented back in 2014, 15. And we've abided by those budget schedules. I'm understanding, so all of the researchers presented their work in March, and the board evaluated each project. That I understand you're not satisfied with that, because it sounds a little.
No,
we're going to go back and do what we did. You'd like us to go back and do what we did in March?
Yes. The problem was when that, and it's unfortunate that we have to do this Zoom meetings, because it's very difficult to see where people are coming from clearly. But the problem with that I remember going back through when you had the scientists come in, the two Michaels and Carl, and went through each of the three projects, and then the board, through a poll, we kind of voted on how I don't know what you had, something set up like 1 through 5, and how did you rate them? I can't remember, something like that. And that was, it was done in good faith, trying to figure out how the board rated the different projects and what they wanted to go ahead with, or what they questioned. But the problem was the scientists did a really good job of selling their proposals or their projects, but there was no time to privately with the board debate, and it's very difficult and discuss the projects. And it was difficult to do it in a Zoom situation, I see, but I would have liked to be around the table where we could have had a thorough discussion of what we expect coming out of these projects and where we are right now. And it's been very difficult to do that. So I don't think we've had a fair discussion of the projects. And again, Mark and other folks, I'm not speaking for me and my own bias. I'm as well as supporting the forest products industry. I'm a member of this, or not a board member of the Oregon Angler Alliance, which is about 65,000 people that are not very happy with the way the fishermen's money is being spent, or they would like some accountability of what's going to come out of these projects. And they're not going to back down, and we have to answer these things as a board and do our duty that we're supposed to be doing, and we're deficient in it. That was part of Brad's hang up too.
Okay, thanks, Scott. And I see Lance and Sean both have their hands raised. I didn't see who was first, but maybe Lance, would you like to go ahead and speak? I'll ask you to unmute.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I hear the point loud and clear. As a fisher and license payer on both sides of the house, fish and wildlife, we definitely want the license dollars to be going to the best use possible. And I guess in my role, my job, I do fisheries management, so sport, commercial fisheries, and then also on the hatchery management side of things. And I guess my perspective, as I see all of the work that's being done through the 3 studies that were cited as evaluating both sides, the hatchery management piece, but also the effects of hatchery in the wild, which is absolutely critical to fisheries management, because if you don't understand what the effects are of hatcheries on wild populations, then you don't know how you're managing your hatchery program. So it can go both ways. If the effects of hatcheries on wild fish are low, then there's the possibility to increase a hatchery program, or maybe it's reduce it. So, I see the connection there of all of these studies in helping to inform both in the hatchery management, but also the effects on wild populations, and they're all connected, and that definitely informs fisheries management. So just to kind of broaden the perspective a little bit on that.
Thank you, Lance. And Sean, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. So prior to Brad resigning, he and I and Selena also were talking about this meeting and this topic. And so I just wanted to share kind of his thoughts about what he was intending, at least when he set this up. And it was really over the past decades since that fund that Scott talked about had come into play, the board's really focused the vast majority of their investment into these really long-term research projects that are seeking to understand the mechanism in the hopes that one day we could, through the hatchery setting, tweak that mechanism so the differences in fitness aren't so great. But that research is long-term. It takes a long time, given the generational cycle, for it to bear fruit. And I think the projects that have been working on, the board has funded, have the potential there, but we've got to be realistic about the timelines here. And so what Brad was interested in was a discussion about whether you continue to invest all the funds into that kind of research, or whether you take a different kind of approach and split some of that into both covering your bases on the long-term research and then looking at whether there's opportunities to fund research on the 2 to 5 year timescale that can result in some more near-term changes that the constituents are really looking for. And it was really, Brad was envisioning a debate on, of that research dollars that we have, what's the appropriate split there? Do we put 100% into the long-term stuff and none into the near term? Or do we do 50-50 or 60-40 or whatever it might be? And then that plays into your decisions about how you allocate funds to both the current projects, the RFP, and whether you call for a new RFP on some of the nearer term stuff like wild broodstock management, for example, or acclimation, things like that. So that's what Brad had in mind when he set this up. Scott, I think your focus is on evaluating whether the current projects, how they stack up against the mission of the center, as well as some of the new proposals there. But I think there's still a need to have for the board to decide how much of this fund they want to invest in each of these types of buckets of research. And that's kind of what Brad had intended.
Yeah, I think the projects, I'm not advocating at all getting rid of these 3 projects, but perhaps, the long-term project can be going on at some level, but there can be side projects coming out of that same funding that are more applicable. I have a whole list of shorter term, very interesting proposals that different scientists out of the group have made that they would really like to see pursued with this funding. And, they don't see it happen. I mean, there's some, just for an example, a very simple kind of project interesting project guy came up with is, we look at out of OSU and a lot of stuff we see it coming out of ODFW, that the first premise of the research or discussion is that hatchery fish are less fit than wild fish, and they're a problem, and we have to work around that. So it starts out with hatchery fish being negative. But if you look at something like this, I mean, you wonder in a stream when you have only wild fish, but you have a lot of predators, let's say like the Coquille River with the bass. And so you only have wild fish in that river, and the predators only have wild fish to eat. But what if you put a whole bunch of hatchery fish in that river, and then the predators could spread out their prey? They could be eating a hell of a lot more hatchery fish and not just wild fish, and maybe you would have better escapement of wild fish. So there's a lot of things like that that's just one of many, many things that people have brought up to me that, they would love to see the research focused on, something that, that's more oriented towards improving fish runs or hatchery operations rather than long-term interesting fish science. I mean, like I say, that I was 100% in favor of those 3 projects. I went and testified with the legislature to get the bill passed for that, but fully anticipating that 9 years later, we would have more fish or be leading to something that would had the possibility of having more harvestable fish returns. And so far, personally, I've not seen that happening, and I don't know on a lot of the studies if it'll ever happen or ever will be applied. I mean, it'd be interesting to get the answer and to know. I'd love to know how wild fish select their mate. We'd like to know that, but if it's not applicable back into a hatchery where we can actually do something with it, then maybe it doesn't fit the hatchery research center. It fits as a science research, which would be the long-term strategic project that should find funding elsewhere, not from the fishermen. And I'm just going to point out one more thing for the board or people who might not understand it. And the questions about this research, this ORS again, 498.833 section 2, this says monies in the fund. This is from House Bill 3012. Monies in the fund may be expended only on research projects recommended by the Oregon Hatchery Research Center Board. So the board has 100% influence or control over how the money is spent on these projects. And again, that's the 30-12 money, the fisherman money.
Can I say something? Oh, is that okay?
Of course, Ted, please speak.
We've got a lot of wonderful little short-term things we can do, and we've not advertised this place at all. I mean, we put out some beautiful little pamphlets and things were just gorgeous. The general public doesn't know what we're going to do. No one knows what we're doing. You got these little short-term things that you can do with hatchery boxes. You got things where you should be advertising at the fishing, these sporting shows. We need to incorporate ourselves more with the general public. The masses need to know what you're doing, and they would be fully supportive of all this. And you might actually get more money towards these programs because the research is very important. But we also need to get out and let people know what we're doing. We need to do little things. You got these hatchery boxes, put some school programs in here and there. Drag some politicians in there. You'll get a lot more with honey than with salt. I'm telling you that you need to really get focused on incorporating the masses into what you're doing.
Good point. Thanks, Ted. I agree that our science communication and outreach could certainly improve and would serve the center well.
Oh, I think it would. And I think the Fish and Game guys would love it, and I think our research people would love it. They should be at the show in the commercial show in Seattle every year to make a presentation of where we're going, so that those papers go out across the nation. We've got great people. We just need to let them know what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's a good point, especially on multi-generational studies where we kind of tend to lose sight of it because it just takes so long to get the results back. But, it's important that we keep the perspective of we're going to get valuable results out of this and let, all sectors of society know that. So kind of preaching that message among all of the board members, even if it takes 5, 10, 15 years to get those results, it's still a valuable project that's going to further the mission of the board and fisheries and hatchery management in Oregon.
Oh, another point on the proposals, projects you put together, Mark, that we were going to discuss. And first, I'd like to say, we really appreciate the effort you put into getting the workshop together and the 30 scientists or so you had there, and working through suggesting the projects and then boiling them down to about 5 or 6 that we were to discuss in this meeting. But so it was really good intentions of doing that, but I'm concerned about how that came about as well, because of the premise that you started out with the scientists, well-intentioned, I guess, is you gave them the mission statement of the Hatchery Research Center to be an internationally recognized leader in fishery science, conducting research to define the mechanisms that may create differences between hatchery and wild salmonoids, recommending strategies to manage those differences. And that was the premise you gave to them, and they're supposed to follow that mission. But that's the board had revised that mission statement and passed a motion to revise the mission statement to include enable sustainable harvest fish abundance for sport, commercial, and tribal fisheries by means of hatchery production and supplementation. That was a change that the board agreed on, but then it was again watered down by the ODFW and OSU, so it doesn't really didn't really end up that way. But the founders of OHRC, and Lindsay, you can probably back this up too. I mean, Wayne Krieger and Arnie Roblin, Patty McEwen. This is their goal or mission of OHRC. The primary purpose, mission, and goal of OHRC is to scientifically determine how hatchery fish and our hatchery operations can enhance sport, commercial, and tribal fisheries by identifying and implementing management strategies for hatchery fish abundance with an acceptable risk to naturally produced fish. Now, if you don't believe that, I mean, I would be happy to have Wayne and Arnie and Kathy McEwen, Brad Witt provide a statement, or they'll even come to the research center and verify that that was their original purpose and mission for OHRC, which has been sort of hijacked and changed and sent different directions from what the original intentions of the research center. So, you know, when we're asking for new projects, I think they should relate back to why the hatchery was really started, to scientifically determine how hatchery fish and our hatchery operations can enhance sport, commercial, and tribal fisheries by identifying and implementing management strategies that provide for hatchery fish abundance with an acceptable risk, not shut down hatcheries production and focus everything on a wild fish. We all want wild fish, and we want to protect them, but not at the expense of having a harvestable fish out there for the people of Oregon too.
Okay, hey, thanks, Scott. With regard to the process, I appreciate your words. I've certainly done my best to develop a fair and transparent process. This board was engaged in prioritizing the concepts that were presented in the request for proposals. The proposals that you saw were those that I received. I then sent those out for technical review, which I then also forwarded to all members of the board here. So, with regard to the mission statement, I recognize that the board did in fact vote upon and approve a revision to the mission statement, but I also recognize that generates a recommendation to ODFW. The board drafted, voted upon, and accepted a charter for board conduct. And stated in that charter is the board acknowledges that their recommendations are advisory to the OHRC director, and that final decisions on the operation of the Oregon Hatchery Research Center are the purview of ODFW and OSU. And so I took that language and I took it to OSU and ODFW, and we discussed it and revised the mission statement to embrace the spirit of the language, putting the benefits before the risks, and recognizing the role of hatcheries in providing fishery benefits. So there were, in fact, changes. We brought that back to the board. We can look at the mission statement again if the board feels the need to do that. But again, looking at this board, which can also be modified, revised, voted upon, this board provides recommendations.
I have another question. We're just having a kind of an open discussion here is the way it's turned out, which is good, I think. But I have a question, Mark, on the charter and operating procedures. I looked that up. That was October 2nd, 2015, which at the time Cam was chair. Lindsay and I think were vice chairs at that time. But I asked Cam, and I can't recall reviewing this charter or agreeing upon it with the board. I wonder, since you got such great notes, I wonder if you can find verification that the board actually did have a chance to review that and approve it. As it is now, I don't know. And
yeah, it did, and I can
back.
share those minutes.
Good, I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Another thought is we have 15 members on the board, but only 12 of them vote. And why do you suppose the legislature wanted the 12 private outfits to vote and not ODFW, OSU, and NOAA? There was a reason for it. So anyway, think about that, because OSU and ODFW are trying to take control of the board. However, there's 12 voting members are clearly independent outside groups is what it's supposed to be. And that was for a purpose in the beginning. If you talk to the founders, I mean, they weren't comfortable with the direction ODFW and OSU was going with the research center in the very beginning. And that's why they came up with House Bill 3441 and the 12 voting members of the board rather than the advisory board that was there prior to House Bill 3441. And
hey, Mark, I just want to jump in. We're covering a lot of familiar ground here, and I think the point is here that RDFW is not trying to steer the board in any particular direction. This meeting was intended to be an opportunity for you all to debate the strategic direction, to hear input from the public, and decide how you want to allocate funds from this research project, from this research pot going forward, whether you want to continue to invest 100% in this long-term kind of research, or whether you want to rededicate some of that fund. That's your decision, and statutorily, it's your charge. We can debate history, but going forward, I think we need to get to a place where you're all comfortable with the direction we're going, and have a say in the research. You know, the statute clearly outlines that any research funded out of that licensed surcharge has to be approved by the board. And so I think rather than debating where we've been, I think we need to look forward to where we're going, and you'll just need to have that discussion and make some decisions here.
I agree, Sean. What I'm saying about kind of hijacking the direction, that was prior to you coming on board. So I'm looking back, that was historic, not going forward. So I just want to make that clear. I mean, I think things are changing since you've come on, so changing for the better.
Yeah, so
But yeah, another, why I got in, another ORS 498.827 says duties of the Oregon Hatchery Research Center Board, and the board shall establish strategic directions and operational objectives for the Oregon Hatchery Research Center, consistent with ORS 496.275. 496.275 says the Legislative Assembly hereby declares in the necessity to review all options and means for the protection and restoration of Oregon's salmon resource that promotes local economic development and enjoyment by all citizens of Oregon. Options and means shall include operation of salmon production facilities in cooperation with the State Department of Fish and Wildlife by both public and private non-private agencies, as well as public partnerships, to meet local production and harvest needs, as well as to help restore and maintain natural spawning populations. So clearly, if you go through all these rules and regulations and original missions and goals, you find out we should be doing something to enhance and improve hatcheries and fish returns. And the public does not feel, the public fishermen does not feel we're headed that direction. I just want to make it clear. Yeah, you know, Sean, you've been in enough meetings with the group to find out where they're coming from. And if we don't change the direction of the research and start producing something that satisfies our clients or people who are funding the bill, they're going to make an effort to do away with us. And this is funded by the public. You got to find out what the public wants. And I know at least you can't speak for the whole public, all the people in Oregon, but speaking for the fishermen and OAA, 65,000 people there, they want the money for House Bill 3012 spent on something that's going to improve hatcheries and hatchery returns, and there'll be some shorter term projects in there. And I agree that these 3 projects may, like Lance said, answer some interesting questions that could be beneficial in the future. But I'm just telling you, people aren't seeing it come out, and they question whether it's going to, and they want their money to be spent on something that's going to provide harvestable fish returns. That's what it's about. And clearly, all the direction from the time OHRC was formed, the intention was to restore harvestable fish returns.
Hey, Scott.
Not 100% protecting wild fish at the expense of having a harvestable fish returns out there.
Hey, Scott, I think we're kind of heading in circles here. It might be helpful to frame this as a proposal, like what you're interested in the board actually doing going forward.
Well, like I say, I've spent 9 years on the board, as well as Jack and Chuck and some others, and we're becoming rather frustrated in the direction we're heading. It seems like we're just an audience to sit there in the meetings and listen to what's said and do whatever OSU and ODFW want to come out of it. We're not serving the people the way we're supposed to, and I don't know what we're doing here.
So I think the task at hand is actually for this board to craft a strategy to address those sentiments, and not to be here just listening, but actually to develop a strategy. And will that strategy involve funding more operational or turnaround projects or larger projects? So that's what needs to be done. We don't want a board that simply listens. Steve Jacobs, I see, did you have a comment?
Well, I may be missing some of the point here, but the recent request for proposals was on a strategic level. What if we had one on the operational level and just kind of see what we get and evaluate those in a rigorous manner and just see how they stack up as far as good science? Because all we hear is we got to do something to have more hatchery fish. Well, I'm not hearing about any specific ways of getting there in terms of a research perspective. All I'm hearing about is we don't have enough hatchery fish. We want more harvestable surplus. Well, you can argue that by enhancing wild fish, we'd have more harvestable surplus of naturally produced fish, and that may be a better direction for the state to go. Hatchery fish aren't the ultimate solution. We got there because we interfered with the natural production of habitat, and we resulted in hatchery as a solution. And in my experience, they have been nothing but a problem. So I take a different perspective than Scott does on this. And I just say, instead of complaining, let's see what you guys have to offer, and let's see how valuable it really could be, or what the actual potential is. I think in putting more hatchery fish in the coquille to eliminate bass production, I have a hard time with that. I think that would not. There's so much risk there, and there's so much. There's so many uncertainties there.
Well, I agree that for the shorter term research, rather than go to 30 scientists from different universities and places around the country to ask for projects, we should be asking Oregon hatchery managers, step biologists. We should be asking fishermen volunteers what kind of projects you would like. And I've got a whole list of them, the shorter term things that they would be interested in doing. And as far as, you're
But
not like.
are they
hearing-
good science? Are they good science or just things that they'd like to see done? No,
Their
we're here to
proposal-
do science.
Their proposals, your scientists have to figure that out if they can be made into good science. I can't tell you that, but
So I think to follow up on
as far
Steve's point.
as far as the
Scott,
hatcheries go, you know, there are maybe some negative things about hatcheries, but the fact is there's been so much habitat lost up and down the coast and all over the country that you can't get back, like all the estuaries been filled in and the roads built and diked and the fish are channeled right on down the river out into the ocean. They don't have the overwinter habitat they used to have. We have an increase in population. And so we're never going to have the natural habitats that you can have the numbers that you used to have. Impossible. But you got people, and you got more people who want to catch fish and harvest fish and have that heritage of fish around. And you're not going to get it with natural fish. Just can't happen because you don't have the habitat anymore. So we need to protect them the best we can, but you got to have hatcheries.
Can I say something?
Of course, please, Ted.
You know, we've lost so much. He's right about that. We've lost so much habitat. I've got LiDAR scans of these river systems with the dairies, with the pollution systems going in, and we have got a tremendous problem. The hatcheries offer some kind of filling. The hatchery boxes, I think, are a way to get the wild fish back in some numbers. We need to put all that back into action. But to dream that it's going to come back the way it was in 1919, I think that's just a pipe dream. You're going to have both of these people working together. Hatchery people and wild fish people are going to have to put away their differences and work together to develop these things. Nobody's going to turn in a super fish to take the eggs from, and we don't know where they are. So we have to do some work on all the fronts. I mean, when you get these LiDAR scans and you look at these things with chlorine, with nitrates and other items, I've seen whole river systems actually from nuclear power plant for 12 or 13 miles of the river has been made radioactive, for Christ's sakes, and they've had to dredge these rivers. You really, we got a whole process of things. So the hatcheries are fill in, and the hatchery boxes are a way to put the wild fish back. And we need to incorporate the masses into this and the people, because they're our eyes. You guys aren't out there on those rivers every day, but those fishermen know when somebody's pulling a quick one. And I see these semi trucks coming in with loads of stuff that they shouldn't be dumping. And they dump caustic sodas, and they dump chlorines, and they dump things. And I see it going across the land directly into the Yamhill, directly into the Salt Creek and these different places. Over in Tillamook, I see the same thing where they've gone through and just went right through a levee and put a pump underneath the river to suck the water out with no permits. We got a lot of work to do, and we should quit bickering about wild fish and this fish and that fish and just create some fish and give the people something that they want. Okay?
I've got another point while everything seems to be open here, Sean. We're short 2 board members, one replacing Brad, which is wild fish advocacy, I think, and the other is the restoration position. And from House Bill, it was originally that when the first House Bill 3441 was formed, that it was up to the director, just at his complete discretion, to appoint the board members. Then there was some concern with that perhaps, I'll just say it, perhaps ODFW, OSU was stacking the board with sympathizers to their bias. So they come out with House Bill 3147. And then from that, ORS 498.825 says, in making appointments under subsection 3 of this section, the director shall consult with organizations that represent or engaged in the same interest as those interests that appointees of the board are required to represent, and shall take into consideration nominations or recommendations of persons for appointment as members of the board that are received in the course of the consultation required by this subsection. So Sean, I wonder if you're familiar with where or have been in contact with Kurt, and does he have some applications for those positions? And has he consulted with the different groups and accepted any recommendations from them? Are you aware?
I think that process is still undergoing. They're accepting nominations, and yeah, as is typical, we reach out to those groups that they're supposed to represent and see if this is an acceptable nominee for them. Scott, I don't want to cover too much ground without trying to settle the question that's in front of you all, which is really how you move forward in a strategic manner, and one that scratches the itch you've been talking about. I don't think we're going to resolve the hatchery wild issue here. There's strong sentiments on both sides, but what this center can do is direct some research that tries to minimize that polarization and find opportunities. And Steve proposed that you all initiate an RFP for some of this operational research and put that through the same process that you've done on the other side of the fence. And so I think the board could take that up and discuss if that's something they want to do. And then I think Mark, in his capacity as interim director, could kind of get that ball rolling. And then that would give you all the opportunity to kind of weigh these, you know, the near term versus the long term on kind of a level playing field.
Yeah, you know, Sean, I certainly could help to initiate that. The RFP that we issued this fall really focused on generating proposals for larger strategic research, but I had initially envisioned having sort of parallel processes, one going for the larger projects and one going for smaller projects or operational projects. It's just, you know, it was too much to get both of those processes off the ground here in 6 months. So we have one up and running. You've all got 5 strategic research proposals, and I also sent you a proposal for some operational research. I suppose it's important to take a moment and sort of consider the pros and cons. There are different options of how this might work moving forward. Certainly there could be an RFP that provides support for both larger projects and smaller projects, and that could be explicit in the RFP, right? Like, we're going to support 3 or 5 operational research projects and 1 or 2 larger budget projects. So that could be stated a priori up front. Another way of doing this might be to have the RFP for the strategic research like we've issued, and then accept proposals for operational research throughout the course of the year, as the OHRC has always done. So funds could be set aside, and the board could, at each of their quarterly meetings, review the proposals for operational research that come in throughout the course of the year. That would offer some flexibility. Otherwise, you might find yourselves bound to the decisions that you make at the beginning of the biennium, and then have no more funds to spend. So there are different ways of doing this. There are pros and cons, and I guess I'd be open to. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are about different strategies for process. Multiple RFPs, one RFP that advertises for both strategic and operational. And then I think the other question is, how would this board like to see funds allocated between larger and smaller projects?
Mark, I think, and what I suggest is for the March meeting, that, like I mentioned before, we need to go through the 3 projects now, how much money has been spent on each one, how much money has been anticipated. So we know, not as a combined 3 projects together, but on each individual project, how much money has been spent, how much is anticipated. So the board is thoroughly familiar with that. There's a lot of new members that, you know, haven't been followed through for a long time, like we have. And then I'd like to have each of the 3 scientists come through and explain their project again, where they're going with it, and ask any suggestions they have to might make side projects come out of that, something that might be more applicable short-term that can be done within their projects. And actually some came out, I think, on these proposals you had. Bluen had one part of his study that was shifted off into more shorter term stuff in the rearing that made good sense, and that could be done as part of that project. And so we would take a look at those kind of things and what the scientists would propose. And then after the scientists give their discussion, then we have a discussion with just the board without the scientists, because some people might feel uncomfortable. I mean, you're a fishing guide, or you're a port manager, or you're an old logger or something, and you're sitting there with these doctors, and you might feel a little uncomfortable. So maybe you could get a more candid discussion, a debate about the projects afterward for each project. Then the board sit down after that and say, okay, where do we want to go with them? Do we want to funnel some money off of these, or do we want to go with how they redirected the project? So we need to do that, and to know what funding there is going to be available then, before we can go further ahead and approve other projects. But then, perhaps if there's same time in that March meeting, then we could bring forth some other proposals, or maybe even board members have a list of suggestions. But like I say, these suggestions, the proposals are ideas, but not really coming from scientists. They don't know if they can be put together. But then maybe you could do a little, check with the scientists and find out what some of these projects might be feasible, and if they do amount to something that could be done. And I think we need to go that direction. And I would make a motion that, I don't know how you put that together, make a motion that we table any further funding till the next meeting, and that in the next board meeting we have a review of funding and a review of the 3 key projects.
Is there a,
Mike? Got a comment on just the budgeting process, how much we have encumbered to these 3 projects, and how far out that commitment is. I know that board is probably lacking some patience in having them have a no end timeline, and we really don't know how much. And to me, I think we've got most of the money committed to those. So I need to definitely look at the project, to our budget and future budgets, to make recommendations for other projects.
Thomas, if you haven't seen them, I suggest you look through the 3 flow charts that follow and track those projects. That's the setup where the board looks at the different stages of the progress of the projects, and we've periodically looked at those during the board meetings.
Is there a motion?
Well, yeah, I'll make a motion that we don't do any further funding, and we until after the next meeting, and then we review the budget for the 3 projects, and another review by the scientists and a discussion of them in the next board meeting. It's kind of a long motion, but
that is a long motion. And there's a lot built in.
You can revise it. You can fix it if you want.
Could there be a shorter motion that would be more easy to understand?
Is there a discussion on that now? Is that where we're at with that motion? No.
No, we haven't had a second, so.
Oh,
I'll second it. Are you there?
Yes, I think we hear you, Ted. Thank you. So what the motion that I heard, if I could paraphrase it, Scott, and please correct me if I get this wrong, is that you would like to see no more funding allocated to research. You would like to have at the next meeting a review of budgets and funds spent by each of the projects, and then a discussion of strategies moving forward. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's pretty close. Good enough.
Okay, now we have time for discussion. And I will say, first of all, I think I need to get a better understanding of what is meant by no more funding. I need to understand, does that mean that we freeze all funding on all projects? Does that mean that we don't fund any new research? Does it mean that we don't fund our researchers that are currently conducting research through the process? There's a lot at stake here.
No, we don't allocate any further funding for new projects and any further extension of what's already done for the current 3 projects until after our discussion in the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have researchers who will not have adequate funds to keep their staff on through the next meeting. So if this motion is passed,
No,
will effectively be canceling their research.
no further funding on new research projects, but and no extension beyond where we are until on the 3 key projects. So your 3 key projects will keep going as, you know, you've got them budgeted right now, but
We do not
review
have them
again the next
budgeted through
meeting.
the next meeting. Because I was expecting that this board would make funding decisions during this meeting. And so they have funding to get through today, basically.
Can you fund them through the next meeting?
If this board,
I mean, I suggest we fund them through the next meeting, yeah. I'm sorry on that. Yeah, I meant to continue them through the next meeting, not shut them off now, of course.
okay, then I would need a motion.
So I guess the motion would be continue funding on the 3 key projects until the next meeting, discussion next meeting, and no further funding on any new projects, but continue funding the 3 key projects through the next March meeting.
Okay. And it would be,
So,
there would be some buffer extending so that there would be transition time.
yeah, you're not going to want to lay somebody off in the last minute or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that. So carry them through till the next discussion after the next meeting, and, you know. Am I clear on the funding now?
Clearer. That helps. Thank you, Scott.
Okay. Thank you.
But we'll need, I think, a very clear motion from this board so that I can direct my decisions here.
Make a motion that the 3 key projects, homing, mate selection, domestication, continue funding through the March meeting, but there will be no funding for any other projects until after the next meeting.
I'd second that.
Okay, discussion.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, Chuck, please.
Once you cut funding, most of the time, it's hard to get it back. It can go away. The project will go away. Right now, you've got a system set up that is paying people and working. And you come in and just shut it down is what you're liable to end up with. This here is our members on the board on this list. It's what you could very easily end up with what you're talking about. That's what your list would look like. Because they will, if this board is not functional, and when you're talking about shutting down the science, cutting off the funding, then you're going to leave somebody in the organization that's higher up than any of us here. You're going to force them to make a decision. And that would be the easiest thing for them to do. And what would make the most sense is to get rid of this board. So I think you need to be aware of what you're flirting with here, because it can have severe consequences. So that's where I'm at, Mark.
Mark, can I clarify
Okay.
something?
Yes, please, Steve. And then I need to make a follow-up on Chuck's because,
Oh, well, if you want to go ahead and do that first, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, the reality is too, that we're doing fish research, right? And are researching on fish and fisheries. And this involves scheduling, and our researchers need to know how many fish to request for their research, and we coordinate with hatcheries. And so it is very difficult. No, let's just go say it. It's impossible for researchers to plan and to keep their staff on and be effective at what they do with the level of uncertainty that's being proposed here. So this is why I was hoping that we would be able to make some decisions at this meeting. And I understand this board needs more information and time. That's what I'm hearing. You know, there are folks that need to know how far out their work is going to go so that they can communicate to our hatchery managers, and our hatchery managers can allocate eggs to them, fish to them for research. And so this sort of ties into what Chuck is talking about. It's really difficult to do business in an environment of uncertainty, and it's difficult to do good scientific research in an environment of uncertainty. And that's where we're at.
I understand all that, Mark, and I'm not, I guess I'm not making myself clear that I'm not advocating you cutting off the funding to these three projects. I'm not saying that after the March meeting, it's going to be cut off. I'm just saying that after the March meeting will then be decided what we do with those three projects, what the board would like to do with those three projects. And even at that point, I would never imagine that you're going to cut them off. I'm sure you got staff out there, you've got projects going, but there might be a logical way to wind them down or redirect them, not just whack somebody off. I'm not advocating that at all. I'm just saying that in this meeting, we don't go fund them for the next 5 years, another $10 million of $5 million of fishermen's money until we get a more thorough review of them. That's all I'm saying. You follow me? So I'm not advocating cutting off any funding. I'm just saying, let's go on to the next meeting, have a thorough review, and decide where we go from there. But
okay, and so maybe I need to offer some clarification too. Early, you know, back, if we were to go back to 2014, 2015, we were talking about budgets for 10, 15 years. But ODFW we've never funded research out for 15 years, not even 5 years. We fund on a biennial cycle. So every 2 years, we amend those contracts and fund the various projects according to, and in this year, according to the level of support and that this board offered during evaluation. So we've never promised 5 years of funding for guaranteed funding for these researchers. Right now, understand, right now, we have researchers that are barely making it through this month. And so I was hoping that this board, and I've been very transparent about this, would be able to make a decision. Do we fund these folks through the end of this biennium, which is June 30th of 2023? That's not very far out. If we move this decision to March, which is fine, and that's what I'm hearing interest to do, well, then we're a little further into the biennium. We certainly need to carry those folks through this decision, right, through this board's decision, with some reasonable buffer so that they don't learn that they're unfunded at that meeting. But then we have a process that I presented to this board whereby we would issue another RFP already in September of 2022 to bring in new concepts. So these concepts that you have, Scott, and that's what I'm hearing you have. These are ideas that could be developed into proposals. Those are research concepts, could then come before this board again. The board can prioritize those research concepts, develop them into an RFP, issue another RFP. The proposals that we receive can then be weighed against our ongoing research, and we can bring in more funds and support more research. But right now, we've got folks who are working on shoestring budgets that are not going to make it to the next meeting unless we have a motion passed to do so here. And then if the decision is made at the next meeting, understand that we need to provide researchers with some stability and certainty for them to do their work. And also, there will be opportunities in the future, in the very near future, alter our course for this board to revise and shift the direction to include other projects. And the question before you today is, how much room do you want to give yourselves for that change in direction that you might want to make, say, in September of next year?
What I'm envisioning, Mark, is we go ahead and fund through the next meeting, of course, but I would anticipate that, let's say in the next meeting, after a review of the 3 projects and a discussion, we say, well, Michael Banks, we would like you to, can you, or he may even make a suggestion that he could alter the research to do something like this that might be a quicker way. You could do some mate selection in a more applicable way. You could do it in the hatchery. He may have a suggestion, and we would just say, okay, we would like you to funnel your research that direction. And even if we want to get rid of it, we'd eventually we'd say, okay, keep your staff, but go this direction, and keep your funding through the biennium. Even if you'd want to cut it off, eventually you would let them finish up through that biennium at a direction you wanted to go. But I'm not suggesting cutting anybody off, but I think we need the discussion of where to go with those, and the same, perhaps the same scientists, the same staff they have within their budget could be altered somewhat, that we head more the direction that supporting harvestable fish abundance or improving the hatcheries more than the direction they are right now. That's all I'm suggesting. So continue funding, have the discussion next meeting about, like I said, about the thorough review of the budget for each project, the funding that's gone into them, and then a discussion about, with the scientists, of what is the expected outcome of these projects, and when are you anticipating anticipating, or what kind of results are you anticipating at this point? And how can it be applied to improve hatcheries and fish returns? And if you can't answer that question, how it can be applied to improving hatcheries and fish returns, then how could you possibly alter your current project to be more aligned with those goals? If that's what the board agrees to, of course.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So I see Lance has his hand raised. What I'm hearing, and then Lance, we'll shift right over to you. What I'm hearing here is a request for the original budgets, which is perfectly reasonable and actually provided in the research plan that's online. Spending to date by each project, which we can certainly offer. And then Scott, I'm hearing interest to extend funding for all ongoing research projects through the next meeting with some reasonable buffer. And at that next meeting, a presentation by proposal authors. I think we would, if we were to do this, and I think it's fine, certainly if we have a full meeting format, this could be done. Have the authors of research proposals come before us, present their proposals, and then have some discussion and decisions made at the next meeting. Does this all sound like what, did I encapsulate your interests there? Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, we're going to have to probably break those into a couple of motions, or maybe two motions, but Lance, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, just a clarification. So the ongoing research projects, Mark, did you say those are funded, or they were obligated, the intent of the research through June of 23, the biennium?
So we have fund. So, and maybe I could go back to that original slide. We have a revenue projection of about $1 million for this biennium, and that started in on July 1st of this year and extends through June 30th of 2023. We expect to bring in about $1 million that we can use to support research. We have committed $635,000 of that to our 3 ongoing research projects. That is not sufficient to get all 3 projects through this biennium. Specifically, Dr. Blumen's research will not be able to continue really beyond January, I suppose. Dr. Bluen, you could comment on that about timelines and budget, maybe?
Yes, thank you. So of the 635, only 90 went to my project. It was basically to allow us to finish up what we started last time. My understanding was that this process would have led to some decisions about our project by this time. So I have a field season coming up. I had to request fish in the fall. They're going to start arriving in February, start doing the crosses. I have collaboration set up with the managers at the OHRC and the Aquatic Animal Health Lab. I took on a new master's student in the fall, all on the assumption that, in fact, we would be able to have this one field season. So we have fish showing up. They're going to do the crosses. The eggs will be ready at the end of May, beginning of June. We'll set up the experiments. They will run through the fall. We'll take them down in the winter. We'll genotype them. That's our field season, and it's kind of a year-long process that I've had to set up in advance, just on the assumption that the funding would be there. So I don't actually have funding to do that, to continue. Basically, what they gave me was enough to finish up what we had finished last time. So if you would like this project to at least go through one last field season, I'll need it funded, at least to some extent, some kind of bridge funding. My hope would be that you allow us this one last set of experiments. If you decide after that that the work we're doing is not in line with the mission of the Institute and you want to cut us off at the end of that, I'll go do something else. But we have everything set in place for this one field season. I would like to see it through because I think we have some pretty interesting information that we can gather, a couple of interesting experiments about conditions that we can modify in the hatchery that might reduce the selection pressures. And I'd really like to see those get done. If after that you decide this is not the line of research you want to do, that's fine. But again, it's I don't have funding to continue. So I would need some active bridge funding to at least get through this this field season.
I guess, and that was the reason for my comment is, you know, we don't want to terminate funding midstream in the middle of these research projects and not, you know, supported those originally and got on board, even if it was as soon as last summer. That, you know, we don't want at least I don't think we want the possibility of terminating funding on our March meeting for an ongoing project that's kind of midstream. So if there's a natural break in the project, that it gets reevaluated, as you say, Michael, you know, after completion of a field season or whatever, then let's look at that as a board, what that natural break would be, and determine whether it is something we want to fund in the future or redirect it. But yeah, definitely concerns about terminating funding midstream, you know, at wherever that would be.
Well, I do too. That's what I would expect in the March discussion, that if the board doesn't want to continue these projects long-term, we should certainly agree at a logical break, what the scientists suggest that makes good sense of a time to cut off. I agree with you completely. That's what we ought to be doing. Yeah.
I don't know how you raise your hand on the.
You've done it, Steve. Go ahead. Thank you.
So yeah, Scott, didn't you put together flow charts that had like checkpoints on checking in on progress on these research, these 3 studies?
Yes, of course. Yeah, there's for all 3 projects.
What do those show as far as timelines to check in as far as progress, and where are we at with that?
Well, you would know as much as I did if you attended the last.
I've never been able to read those things. I can't. The font's too small for me to read. be honest with you. But I mean, if we, since my history with the board, we prioritize these 3 projects, and all of a sudden to cut them off now is saying all the prioritization and the efforts we've done to date, we weren't making good decisions. It seems a little foolish to me to cut things off at this point in time.
Nobody's advocating cutting them off at this point in time.
That's not what I've been hearing. I've been hearing like we'll go to March, but that puts Michael Blue in a situation where he really has to make drastic changes in his program.
That's not what we just said. We just the last discussion before, Lance said, let's find a logical cutoff point. If we as a board decide not to continue them, then where is a logical cutoff point suggested by the scientists? That makes sense. Nobody would whack them off in March. I mean, that's ridiculous.
So what's the purpose of a decision in March then? I don't understand that.
In March, we decide whether we want to continue with the projects as planned now, whether we want to redirect them. And if we decide we don't want to continue with the project out to full completion, then what would be a logical cutoff point where you can still get some value out of the research without losing it? We get a suggestion, like maybe Mike Bluen just said, maybe, you know, he needs to go out through this next period when he finishes the rearing, and that would be a logical cutoff point. So we should agree to a logical cutoff point, not whack somebody off in the middle of a project that would lose what we've put into it so far. We'd hope to get something out of it. And I'm not advocating ending any of these projects or cutting them off. I'm just saying we need to figure out where we are with them and what we're going to get out of them, what fishermen are going to get out of them for their money. And we need a further discussion before we sit here right now and agree to have them go on forever because
Well,
they
two
won't.
of the
They'll get-
projects,
I'm telling you, they're gonna-
two of the projects, you have to get adult returns back before you can see if they had any success or not. So, and we've committed to that when we agreed upon those two projects. So I don't know. I struggle with this.
Thanks, Steve. And I see we have.
The board
and-
board
and Mike-
can, the board has the authority to cut off any of these projects anytime we want. The board has that complete authority. I'm not suggesting, and I'm just telling you, we do.
Okay, noted. And I'm also hearing, but it's not your interest to do that right now, Scott. We had a comment.
Oh,
Mike Bloom had his hand raised, and then Tom.
Yeah, I had a comment. Last September, the board whittled down a number of concepts from about 24 to 5. We made that decision. I think now we've reduced that down to 5, and it's up to us to make that decision now and not postpone it. There's no reason to postpone.
yes, there is. There's a reason to postpone it because the funding comes from House Bill 3012 and the $400,000 of the fisherman's money that we haven't really agreed that we want to do that yet. There's no way you're going to go ahead and fund those projects now.
Mike Bloom.
Yeah, so the requests are only through the end of this biennium, which, as I was explaining, the way the research works, would be the logical termination point for my particular study for this round of experiments. Again, we were getting fish now, we raise them from the summer through the winter, we take the experiments down, we do the genotyping analysis. Basically, by the end of that biennium, we're just getting our data. So that if you have decided by then that you don't like this work anymore, that is a good stopping point. But I don't have the money to do that work. So of the 3 projects, this one basically wasn't funded. So what I'm hearing is that you would like to see this work continue, but for this particular project, you have to proactively fund it to some extent to get it through the end of the biennium. And I totally respect that if during that process you decide you don't want to fund this work anymore, that's fine. Like I said, I've got other things I can study. But to get it through this one last field season, you guys need to proactively fund the work.
Michael, can I ask you a
There isn't
question?
money there to continue.
Michael, what was your budget for the continued work?
I can't remember. Do you have that?
I can pull that up in just a minute. That went out. That went out to board members.
Right, I think it was around 200,000 if I got that correct.
Recall.
So it's not the whole $400,000. That was my point.
Quite right.
So is that something that we need to decide now on? For so Michael has a direction here. Is that right, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, so with the 90,000 that they gave me to finish up the last bit of work, I've basically been spending it as little as possible because of the uncertainty. I was unable to search for a postdoc or a tech. I did take on this student because at the time when I made that decision previous spring, I thought this work would continue. So I've been, just kind of, as we say, living off this 90,000, which is now down to like 65. So just in the hopes of at least, allowing my master student to, get through some experiments. And then after that, I wasn't sure how we'd pay for it. But my hope would be y'all would just fund it through the end of the biennium. And like I said, at that point, that's a logical stopping point. If you don't want this kind of research anymore, that's fine. But at the very least, I think we have some interesting experiments that, may give you some direction. And so, yeah, I don't know what to say.
Michael,
Again, this is just about money through
just-
the end of the biennium. It's not about funding stuff out for the next
Right.
5 years.
And the price tag for that
I
is
see
about-
Michael,
The budget I see is,
Michael, let me ask you, excuse me. Michael, let me ask you a question to just how you would deal with this in our next, let's say in the March meeting. I just want to be right up front with you. If we say the fishermen paying for the research, your research, expect results that'll improve hatchery operations, production and increase restored harvestable fish returns, hopefully yet in their lifetime, how will or how could your research be aligned to accomplish this?
That's very easy. One of the main problems that you're dealing with, the reason you do not have more fish for harvest is because there is a management decision to control PHOS. All right. That is your problem. And the reason they have to do that is because of this big stack of data showing that hatchery fish have lower fitness than wild fish. What I'm trying to do is figure out how to make hatchery fish that are like wild fish, and then you can release as many as you want. That's what we're trying to do. All right. But it's a difficult problem. And I never said it would be done in 6 years. I've always been extremely upfront and clear about expectations. We're going to do these series of experiments. We're going to modify these environmental conditions, see if we can find evidence that we have relaxed the selection pressures, which are going to produce the type of fish you want. And it's a series of, short-term 1.5 year experiments that I committed to do. We've been doing them. And so if we're successful, what you're going to get is hatchery fish that you can safely release to mingle with wild populations. There's your harvest increase. That's what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to figure out a way to produce fish that you can release more of, because the problem isn't that hatcheries don't know how to make more fish. These guys are really good at what they do. Talk to Scott Patterson. I mean, they have it dialed in. I don't think we need to figure out how to tweak hatcheries so they can increase their production a little bit. That's not the problem. The problem is a management decision to control PHOS. If we could make hatchery fish that have higher fitness, you wouldn't have to do that. That's the whole point of our work.
I understand that.
Okay.
And what you're talking, the research you're doing is pretty much longer term. And I understand that OHRC and what we do has, is not policy. ODFW sets the policy, how many fish they want to release and when to release them and what. But actually, what your second proposal project here, well, coming out of the 30 scientists in the workshop, the proposal you had has something to do with the advancing fish cultural practices on fish quality, that a shorter term project that, that looks like it would have a shorter term application, this more recent proposal you had. And my question is maybe some of your longer term project can be funneled that way to do some of those shorter term projects. At least we should have a chance to look at that.
Tom Alcock, you had a question.
And your explanation is good, but we need each of the scientists to do that and explain, clearly what we could anticipate out of it and how long before we might get something actually usable out of it. And unfortunately, this is the situation for everybody listening, at least the way I look at it, is the purpose of the research center, the goal. I mean, if you go back, not me, I can tell you, I could bring Wayne Krieger and Arnie Roblin and Brad Witt and Caddy McEwen, and those people could come right in here and sit down at the meeting, and also a bunch of the current representatives that we're working with come right in and say, the purpose of the Hatchery Research Center is to help restore harvestable fish abundance, not science forever. And yes, it's good to find out the differences between wild fish and hatchery fish and minimize those differences. But, a big part of the issue is not OHRC. OHRC can do, we'd like to see research that can improve hatcheries and do things to improve fish returns, like I envision things you can do, rearing and predator control and a lot of things like that with the fisherman money. I mean, you can get grants elsewhere to do a lot of this long-term interesting science, but the purpose of the Hatchery Research Center being formed to begin with was to restore harvestable fish abundance. Granted, that's ODFW policy, and in the past, ODFW has had more of a policy of we're going to protect wild fish at the expense of having hatchery fish abundance or harvestable fish returns. And that's policy. But the research we do ought to be focused on how we can improve fish returns, hatchery fish returns, and reduce predation and improve rearing. I mean, there's all kinds of more things we'd like to know about the timing and release. I mean, and things that we can actually do in the hatchery, like there at Morgan Creek Hatchery, what we try to do in mate selection there is what you can do with what you have on the ground. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of kids spawning fish and working in there and getting excited about fisheries. And we try to select jacks and 1 year and 2 year, 3 or 4 year old fish and mix one male with one female and as many different generations and families as we possibly can, and rear them that way to get all the diversity we can, and plus bring in all the wild stock we're allowed to bring in. So we try to do, some practical things on the ground, and there's more that we would like to know about releasing fish. I mean, do you release them at a certain size? Do you release them? Can you set it up where they can smolt and migrate when they want to migrate, not being forced out all at once at a certain size? And there's a lot of different things that
let
like
other folks have a chance to speak as well. And those are all great ideas. We need to get those concepts developed into proposals. And
Call a question.
Tom, you had
I'd like to call a question.
Mhm.
Like to call a question.
Yes.
Have to vote for the motion.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your
I
question.
said, I think we should like to call the question. In other words, we need to vote. I think we should vote on the motion.
So the motion, as I understood it again, and Scott, was to communicate original the budgets for these projects, communicate the funds that have been spent at our March meeting, have research proposers present their proposals, but until and with some reasonable buffer beyond that time, not cut the funding for ongoing research projects. Is that correct? And then we discussion by surrounding a number of things, but including Michael Bluen's project. What I heard from you, Scott, was that that there would be a reasonable that this work should be funded through a reasonable stop point, and Dr. Bluen communicated that stop point would be at the end of this current biennium. We can vote on
I'm not suggesting any. I'm not suggesting cutting any funding at all at this point. That would be discussed cutoff times at the next meeting. Between now and what's decided, you just continue funding as you need it.
Dr. Bluen, and then we need to respect Tom's interest to have a vote on the motion.
Yeah, I don't have funding to cut is the thing. So my request is that you proactively actually fund the work at least through the field season. Thank you.
So that would require a motion from the board. You're muted. We've got to unmute you there, Steve.
That's okay with me if you
As
want.
far as parliamentary procedure, it's not even close to something I'm anywhere competent at. But I think we need to have a vote now to determine if we want to fund Michael Bluen or not, because he has a decision point he has to deal with. Is that correct, Michael? Is that what you're asking? So
Let me say, Mark, if Michael needs that funding to continue through that cutoff point, just put that part of the motion to carry to that point that Michael suggested. That's okay with me. To change my motion to say that.
So that is effectively an approval of his proposal.
Through that. Yeah,
Yes.
Through that point. Yeah.
It approves his proposal, the $220,000.
Well, that should be a separate motion.
Which I believe should maybe, I agree with you, Tom. So could a member of the board structure these motions?
You need a second on that motion, Mark?
I haven't heard. We have a motion on the floor that's been seconded, and we're in discussion. We could have another motion on the floor, or we have a vote on the original, by my understanding.
Okay, I'll forward a new motion. I'm not sure that's how you say that, but I move that we continue approve Michael Bluen's proposal for the approximately $220,000, so he can continue his research through the biennium.
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it, Mark.
Thank you, Chuck.
We have two motions now on the table. Is that the problem? Or is that a problem? Can we have motions? It seems to me a problem to have two motions. We should first vote on the original motion and then have the second one that Steve said. That would seem to me the, more logical way to do it.
Mark, what do you need? I don't think I understand what we need. I'm
So I
fine with that
understand
second motion.
I
The
understand
first motion
Tom's
then
point.
could be.
He is arguing that we cannot have two motions on the floor at the same time. So we need to take action on the first motion. We had that motion was brought forward, seconded. We had discussion. We can vote on that motion. My understanding of that motion, if it passes the way it was worded, that it sort of leaves us in a bit of an ambiguous point with respect to funding for Dr. Bluen's.
Hey, Mark.
Yes, Sean.
Just given Scott was okay with Steve's motion, I'd say to Scott, you can withdraw your motion for the time being. Steve can submit his. You can vote on that, and then you can revisit yours, Scott, without the component that you've just voted on with Steve.
Thank you, Sean.
It's okay with me.
So you just have to say, I withdraw my motion.
I withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Scott.
And then Steve, you're on.
So I gotta say it again.
Thanks, Sean.
Well, that's gonna be tough, but I move that we fund Michael Bluen's current proposal to extend his research through the biennium.
Do we have a second for that motion?
I second that.
Okay. Discussion. Any questions or comments from members of the board?
Just a clarification. So this would be funding the 220K, and the research proposal was one of the 5 that you sent out, Mark, to the board before the meeting.
That is all correct. Yes.
Wait a minute, excuse me, what was that? This is not for a new proposal. This is continuing his project, right? Yeah.
That's correct. The proposal that Dr. Bluen submitted would allow him to continue his project.
This,
Biennium.
yeah, this This is the, one of our 3 projects, the domestication project. We're not talking about a new proposal. That's right. And it's funding it through the cutoff point that he suggested that he needed to, keep things working smooth. Right.
Right. Yes. His proposal was a proposal to continue his work.
Right.
Is
So
there,
you ready for a vote?
we can ask, would anyone else like to comment on this motion?
I'm just curious, does this leave the other 2 long-term proposal or projects, does it cut them off, or, are we including those in here as well?
The 2 other ongoing projects, I believe, have funding to continue. Michael Banks submitted a proposal that you all have, which expands upon the commitment that ODFW originally committed to him. So that you should all certainly consider. But I don't believe we'll have any of our researchers fall off the table through passage of this motion.
So Michael's the only one who would be affected if we didn't agree to this, I guess.
Of ongoing researchers, yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So this would allocate 220 of the 400,000 to Dr. Balloon's research. So that still leaves $180,000 that could be allocated to other research projects, including those that you have proposals for. Other questions or comments? I'm signing up here on the side for a class in parliamentary procedure. Okay, should we move to vote?
Yes.
I see folks nodding yes. So this motion on the floor is to fund Dr. Balloon's proposal, which you've all had an opportunity to see, and that will keep his funding going through the biennium, which ends on June 30th of 2023. Voting yes or no to pass this motion in the same order as before. Lindsay Ball. We'll have to unmute you, Lindsay, but I think I could read your lips there, but.
A thumbs up or a thumbs down.
A thumbs up or a thumbs down will also work. I think that's a thumb up. Ball. Thank you, Lindsay. Scott Starkey.
Yes.
Thank you, Scott. Tom Alcar.
Yes.
Thanks, Tom. Jack Smith.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Ted Simon.
Yes.
Thanks, Ted. Steve Jacobs.
Yes.
Okay. Travis Mackey.
Yes.
Dwight Collins.
Yes.
Derek Wall.
Yes.
Derek. And Chuck Pavlik.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. Dr. Balloon's research proposal and budget is approved. At the 11:50 hour. Which is a good time to transition to the next and last item on our agenda to talk about the March board meeting. So what I've heard here, Scott, and we can shape this into a motion if you'd like to again. But what I've heard interest is for a communication of original budget proposals for all of the 3 ongoing research projects, funds spent to date, and then at the March meeting, have researchers present their research proposals to the board for discussion and subsequent decisions.
Yes, I don't think we need a motion. That can just be, the agenda is agreed upon between pretty much you and the chair, which would be Chuck. So if you guys want to do that, that's good. You've got other things, of course, on the agenda. You still got to elect a chair and all that stuff.
Okay, that works for me. And yes, absolutely. We still need a chair for this board. So that will also be on the agenda for the next meeting.
I'd just like to comment that I didn't want to be chair. I would have been completely happy to have Brad continue with what he was doing, but I've invested 9 years into this, and you can see I've spent plenty of time researching out these different ORS regulations and bills and trying to find out how we're supposed to function and talking to the founders to find out what they want out of it. So I put plenty of effort into it. If you don't want me as chair, that's fine, but I hope somebody else is willing to step forward and put the time and energy into it, what it takes to make this thing work right.
Thank you, Scott. I'd like to take a moment to, and maybe since Dr. Balloon had the opportunity to talk about his timelines and budgets as our other ongoing researcher here, Michael Banks, would you be willing to talk a little bit about budgets and timelines and where you're at with your research? And then we can have a
Certainly.
discussion at the March meeting.
Certainly. Do you hear me clearly?
Yes.
So I'm happy to say that we did the third of our trial spawns at Sandy Hatchery in early November this year. And it was very exciting because the returns this year included the first offspring from our spawn in 2019. So all the jacks that came back this year were from our experiment. And Dave and I were really happy to be able to sample almost 1,300 of them. There was a tremendous return of coho to the state this year. I can't claim that's because our experiments are beginning to take effect, but the jacks at least were at Sandy were part of that. And we are in the process of analyzing those 1,300 samples. I may be able to report to you on the findings in our March meeting. The timeline of our research is that is the last spawn. And we had to assign budget to all the work associated with that spawn. I have budget now to continue with the staff to be able to analyze those 13,000 jacks, as well as all the adults and jacks that return at the end of 2022. So that would be, at that opportunity, we would have had a look at the returns and the outcome from hatchery mating in ways that we estimate they would have mated if they were wild, and the relative fitness of those compared to traditionally mated hatchery fish for 1 year. So that it'll be for the 2019 spawn. But as you know, you have supported a spawn in 2020 and 2021. And as a completion point for all those returns would take us through to 2025. The additional project that I have before you right now in terms of review for the $400,000 funding is to develop an automated sampler, because we discovered that there's a lot of activity on spawning day at hatcheries, and to be able to sample all the adults as well as the jacks, this year was about 5,000 fish in a matter of 2 days, is not feasible without automation. So that's a collaborative project with a new innovation lab that we have at the new Marine Studies building out at Hatfield. And I see he's just left now, but we have an engineer that I'm collaborating with on that project. potentially to support an automated sampler.
I think I see him with us here.
Oh, he's still here. Okay.
I am still here.
Sorry, you're not on my screen. You were for a long time, but oh, there you are. Good to see you. So there you can see in the backdrop there behind Drummond is our new innovation lab, which is a very exciting facility we have in the new Marine Studies building.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. And so what I'm hearing is that at our March meeting, we'll have opportunity to talk more about all the proposals. I'll circle back to all of the other researchers and invite them. I hope and believe we can have that meeting in person and return to our fuller schedule. We don't have a date set for that meeting yet, but I would propose perhaps the 8th of March would be in keeping with our precedent. Any questions or comments, thoughts about that date?
What was that date?
March 8th, it would be the second Tuesday of March. We could do it on the 1st, I suppose, too.
Oh, maybe Mark, if you could suggest a date or two and then send out a poll and see how many people can attend as it fits their schedule. And is there any chance that can be a sit-down meeting instead of a Zoom?
Oh, I hope so, Scott. I think there is a chance.
Okay.
It's a possibility and maybe even a probable. So
I was telling Chuck maybe we could have a meeting. We could have it outdoors, and we could wear our down coats and our muckluck boots and sit around chairs outside and do it. Maybe rain gear if we need it.
Doesn't scare me. That's good. So I'm thinking sometime in early March, so I can send out a poll to members of the board here. But I would think we would want to do that on the 1st of March.
Falling asleep. I'm confused whether March 1 or March 8.
I'll poll everyone here unless we want to do this now. It could be either date.
Prefer a little time to study the calendar and see for sure. Just give us a couple days.
Okay, I can set up a doodle poll and send it out to everyone, all the board members.
Thank you.
We can set that date.
Okay.
We've got a little time.
Mark, one other thing that we might like to think about on that March meeting. This meeting here today, we've been at it for what, 4 hours? I think we ought to make sure that we have plenty of time scheduled for that March meeting. There's a lot that's going to happen and be going on. So I think 4 hours at the least, and maybe a little more. It's easy to leave early, but it's hard to add time to these meetings.
I agree, Chuck. And if we can meet in person, I think we return to our full length meeting schedules. If we can't meet in person, if we're stuck in Zoom, I think it would be difficult to have all of the researchers present their proposals, but not impossible. So I think we need to remain open to that possibility, but I'm hoping that we can be back in person and have a full length meeting to allow researchers to present their proposals to your questions.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to continue to stretch the meeting times to cover all the subjects. I think we're going to have to bite the bullet and just have a longer meeting if need be.
Okay, noted. Thanks. And so we are now at the 12 o'clock hour. Chuck, as vice chair, would you like to offer a few closing comments and adjourn our meeting?
Yeah, I would like to comment that this was one of the more interesting meetings in my 9 years. on the board. But nonetheless, I think we did accomplish some things today, and that's good. And I would like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and be careful.
Thanks, Chuck. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make the motion that we adjourn the meeting.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Chuck, you get to say meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned. I got a big sandwich waiting for me.
Awesome. Okay, thank you all. I appreciate everything you do. We'll see you next time.